is our second last Getting in the Weeds section, and today's topic is the disease management in irrigated crops. So we have Dr. Saji Raman and also Dr. Paul Hildebrand joining us today to talk about disease management in irrigated crops. So I will pass my microphone to Saji. He will starting his PowerPoints. So during the webinar, please send any questions you have in the chat or Q&A. Myself will monitor the Q&A and chat, and Dr. Hildebrand will help Saji to answer questions or including any source he has. Okay, so Saji, it's your time.
Okay, good morning, everybody. So I will start sharing my screen now. Okay. So is it okay, you? Okay. Okay, good morning, everybody. And so this is the follow-up of on the getting into weeds session. So just to in the beginning, I will just want to remind you about Zoom housekeeping. So all participants will have their audio and video turned off during the webinar. So if you will want to ask a question, please use Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. If preferred, you can also ask a question in the chat function of the webinar. The chat and Q&A will be monitored throughout the session and addressed during the live Q&A session happening at the end of the presentations. Perennia's our vision is Nova Scotia is a recognized world leader in producing innovative, environmentally responsible, safe food of impeccable quality. And our mission is supporting growth, transformation, and economic development in Nova Scotia's agriculture, seafood, and food and beverage sectors. With this, I will come up with the topic of today's talk, disease management in irrigated crops. So I will be presenting, and Dr. Paul Hildebrand will accompany me later in Q&A sessions. The CEU credits will be available for this session, and the code will be displayed at the end of the presentation. So just to start I will start with the importance of irrigation. Irrigation is an artificial means of introducing water into the cropping system to promote plant development. Current global area equipped for irrigation is about 301 million hectare, and it provides and the agriculture under irrigation it provides 30 to 40% of the world's gross food output. Out of this 40% of the irrigated area, 38% of the irrigation is with groundwater. The rest is with surface irrigation water or non-conventional sources. There are two sources of water, natural sources and artificial sources. And under artificial sources of water, it includes lakes, rivers, rainfall, groundwater. And under artificial sources, it comes reservoirs and dams. I will start to the important disease triangle. So for disease to develop, we need a susceptible host, a virulent pathogen, and favorable environment. So under pathogen, there are other factors also. For example, if the pathogen is virulent, and also its biology in terms of its reproduction behavior and spore dispersal. Under favorable environment, temperature and moisture are the most important factors. Just to show you the importance of moisture in disease development. So I received this sample. It was infected with cabbage black spot, and after only 10 hours of incubation, you can see on the top right corner the profuse sporulation of the pathogen, and the at the bottom right pictures, these are the conidia of Alternaria brassicicola. So you can imagine that the wetness is very important. Tissue wetness is very important for any disease to develop. So irrigation has has a profound effect on disease development. Moisture arrives in the crop canopy from various sources, for example, rain, dew, fog, and irrigation. In terms of irrigation, a choice of the irrigation system affects plant development as well as disease onset, pathogen dispersal, and rates of disease progress. Irrigation can lead to the production of a dense crop stand, thus, and it influences the microenvironment within the crop canopy. So the lower part of the canopy, which is close to the soil, it will have its micro environment will be different than the upper layers of the leaves. Water applied in excess or in deficit may result in the development of many fungal and bacterial plant diseases. Irrigation, especially sprinkler irrigation, results in a reduction in canopy temperature while increasing relative humidity and the period of deep wetness. It is particularly true at the lower leaf layers, which are close to the soil. Dispersal of pathogen spores may occur as a result of direct impact of droplets of irrigation water or via the necessary hydration of specialized protein bodies which are falling on the ground, which are buried in the soil. So just to give you different types of irrigation, flood irrigation, we hear the just everything is covered with the water. It is not sustainable, not efficient, not economical, and labor intensive. In Nova Scotia, we do not practice this method. But if under flood irrigation, soil-borne pathogens can easily spread through the flow of water. With furrow irrigation, it's also not practiced in Nova Scotia because our land is hilly. But furrow irrigation requires large amounts of water, usually demands higher rates of nitrogen fertilization, which can predispose the plant to many diseases. So under furrow irrigation, so if plants are infected, so then with the flow of water, the inoculum can be spread in the entire field. With drip irrigation, is considered the most efficient. In addition to and it is usually recommended to avoid wetting of aerial plant pads. So and generally results in less foliar diseases because here you are applying the water just close to the plant base. So then it does not have any impact on the leaf wetness. And it has been shown that lower incidence of diseases caused by Phytophthora, Septoria, and Xanthomonas and Alternaria. When they used drip irrigation, it was less disease than the sprinkler irrigation. So sprinkler irrigation is widely used in the valley. It offers better water distribution to the crop at reasonable economic costs, more efficient than furrow irrigation, promotes a foliar I'm sorry, or foliar wetting. I'm sorry, favors many pathogens, favors pathogen spores, dispersal of bacteria and other fungal spores. So in terms of efficiency, drip irrigation is considered the most efficient, and surface irrigation or flood irrigation is considered the least efficient way of irrigating the crops. Water molds are usually they are the oomycetes group of fungi, and they are found in open sources of water. Phytophthora and Pythium species especially are water molds that are difficult to control, especially under warm, wet conditions. 26 species of Pythium and 17 different species of Phytophthora have been well documented in irrigation water. These pathogens can cause symptoms like damping of foliar blights, crown, and fruit rots. Thick-walled oospores survive between crops. So this is the spore structure which can withstand harsh environmental conditions, and it can survive on benches, floors, planting media, or soil. And in those zoospores, so they produce zoospores, which are flagellated spores, so they can swim. They are well adapted to aquatic conditions. It can be introduced to the greenhouse via plant plugs or other a pre-finished plant material, or it can hibernate on dirty plant containers, benches, and walkways. It is particularly true in greenhouse conditions. And also in under greenhouse conditions, some growers, they use they recycle irrigation water, and in this way they can recirculate plant a nutrient solution, but it can also increase the spread of waterborne pathogens. So it is like you are re-inoculating the plants yourself. This is in this slide, I just want to highlight a few important features of the Pythium life cycle, as I showed you. So the important phases are on the left side. I have highlighted oospore. You can see it's on the lower left side. This is the thick-walled spore, which can withstand environmental conditions, and it gives rise to zoospores, which are, you can easily see, they have flagella with which they can swim. And on the bottoms, on the lower side, I just highlighted with the red triangle the sporangium, which is a asexual spore, and it also gives rise to zoospores which can swim and infect their host plants. So you can see they are well adapted to aquatic conditions. On the top left side, this is a lettuce plant which is infected with Pythium. Pythium causes nibbling of the roots, as you can see on the lower panel, on the lower left panel. This is what it does to the roots, and as a result, plants remain stunted and it can eventually die. This you can easily observe in the right side on the picture. Here you can see there are two varieties of green lettuce. On the left side, the variety is resistant. On the right side, you can see that there are many dead plants, and it's very uniform across the field. So it is most probably it was spread through irrigation. This is a complex table, but you need not to go into detail. It is just the red with the red rectangle. I just tried to highlight that different Pythium species, they were reported from pond, open source water, like canal, runoff, rivers. That then this is the life cycle of late blight pathogen, Phytophthora infestans. This, as similarly, I have highlighted with red rectangle oospore, which is a sexual spore, and then it can withstand adverse environmental conditions. And then I have highlighted also sporangium, which is the asexual spore. But both of them, they give rise to zoospores, which have flagella, and they can swim in the water to infect their host. Some of the diseases caused by downy mildew, Phytophthora species. So panel A is the downy mildew of grapes, B is the downy mildew of cabbage, C and D is the downy mildew of soybean. Upper three pictures, they are the late blight of potato. You can see the white sporulation on the potatoes. And the lower three pictures are for the late blight infection of tomatoes. You can see how devastating it can be in the field. Here is this table presents the list of different Phytophthora species which have been found in pond water, river. So it's mostly the open water sources. Now, plant pathogenic bacteria. So irrigation water provides the moist conditions essential for bacteria to enter plant tissue, multiply, and disseminate. In the presence of moisture, the transpiration rate is increased, and then it enhances and it favors the natural openings of such as stomata and hydrothotes. Hydrothotes are opening at the leaf edges, and so in this way, these openings, and bacteria needs those openings to enter and infect the plant tissue. Regular monitoring and surveillance of potential reservoirs of plant pathogenic bacteria is necessary. In this table, I just highlighted few species of plant pathogenic bacteria, and then the water source. So you can clearly see, they were found mostly in open water sources like rivers, ponds. Further on plant pathogenic bacteria, so rain and overhead irrigation cause bacteria to be splashed from plant to plant. Rain and overhead irrigation washes bacteria from leaves, which may flow into open irrigation systems. Soil inhabiting pathogenic bacteria contaminate water by runoff or leaching. Recycled irrigation water, storm water runoff, lakes, and stagnant water are potential inoculum sources of plant pathogenic bacteria. Aquatic plants and weeds may act as reservoirs of plant pathogenic bacteria. Therefore, elimination of those aquatic alternate host plants is considered as an integrated management strategy to control plant pathogenic bacteria. So those plant pathogenic bacteria have the ability to overwinter or to survive in the aquatic plants. Plant parasitic nematodes also are important class of pathogens. Most of the plant parasitic nematodes spend part of their lives in soil or in water, plant debris in soil. So for example, cis-forming nematodes such as Heterodora species can be carried away in water. In this table, I have highlighted the sources of irrigation where different species of plant parasitic nematodes were found, and you can clearly see it is still the open source water, like waterways, runoff water, pond water, and river water. So I will emphasize more on sprinkling irrigation because most of the research has shown that sprinkler irrigation, it favors plant diseases. Sprinkler irrigation results in wetting of the entire crop canopy and soil surface compared to drip irrigation and may increase the risk of foliar diseases. For example, Pyronospora sparsa, which causes blackberry downy mildew, its severity was noted as 97% under sprinkler irrigation, but it was reduced to only 10% under drip irrigation. So you can clearly see a difference. Other factors which affect they are the amount of water given, like how much more, if you give more water, more disease risk. And then frequency of irrigation, if the irrigation frequency, if it is more frequent irrigation, more disease risk. For example, frequent sprinkler favors Alternaria solani. It causes early blight on potatoes and tomato, and also strawberry rots, for example, which are caused by botrytis, anthracnose, leather rot, and crown rot. Time of the day is also important, which we will discuss later when I will cover the dew section. Aeration and soil moisture. So when we irrigate, then the air spaces in the soil, they are becoming less. So if we irrigate too much, so then it favors the oomycetes, the Phytophthora and Pythium species. As I showed you before, they have zoospores which are mobile, which can swim in the in water. So it favors oomycetes, where the oxygen is less. So they are well adapted to low oxygen level, and irrigation water plays an especially important role on the dispersal of oomycetes, as I told you before. Phytophthora capsicii and Phytophthora parasitica were radially dispersed in furrow irrigation, water up to 70 meters from the point sources of inoculum in different crops. So you can see that if one plant is infected, the inoculum spread can be till 70 meters with sprinkler irrigation. Relationship between, I would like to highlight the interaction between temperature and wetness duration on disease development. For this, I have chosen the example of anthracnose of strawberry, which is caused by Colatotrichum ecotatum. Leaf wetness duration has been considered the most important microclimatic variable for disease establishment and progress. In this case, in anthracnose, so below 4 degrees and above 35 degrees, the disease incidence was very low. Fruit disease incidence increases with increased wetness duration. Optimum temperature for disease development on mature and immature fruit was found to be between 25 to 30 degrees, and 80% of the disease incidence was observed after 13 hours of wetness. This will be more clear in those graphs. So in this, I have on the x-axis you have wetness duration, on the y-axis you have percentage disease, and then there are 4 graphs, and they represent different temperature regimes. So when the temperature was 20 degrees, and the orange line, it represents mature fruit, and the blue line represents the immature fruit. At 20 degrees, so it needs to reach 80% of the disease severity level, it needs 24 hours of leaf wetness, as indicated by a red arrow. But when the temperature was 25 degrees, it only needs 12 hours of wetness duration to cause nearly 100% disease incidence. So, and then if you will notice at 35 degrees, irrespective of leaf wetness duration, the temperature, if temperature was too high, so it does not favor the disease development. Regarding pathogen biology, the way it reproduces, what kind of spores it produces, it also matters. So in this case, most fungi, they produce spores which can be easily dispersed by air, but some fungi require water for spore dispersal because their spores are embedded in a gelatinous matrix. It's like a gel-like structure, which I will show you in the next picture. So asexual sporulation structures such as Pycnidium, different Ascochyta, Phoma, and Septoria species. And then they also produce a servulus, as in case of anthracnose. Higher disease severities of gummy stem blight and anthracnose of watermelons with sprinkler irrigation, but the use of furrow irrigation drastically reduced the disease severity. In case of strawberry, it was noticed that drip irrigation leads to very low anthracnose incidence and postponed disease onset because it produces the spores in gelatinous matrix. So with drip irrigation, there will be no water droplet or splashing effect. Similar findings were observed for sweet pepper anthracnose also. These are the pictures from the lab. On the left side, extreme left side, you will see the leaf which was incubated under humid conditions, and then with the white circle, it shows the sporulation. And then I have zoomed in the middle 2 pictures. You can see the with red with white arrows and white circle. I have indicated the gelatinous matrix. You can see it's like a gel-like structure. The spores will not be dispersed unless there will be splashing effect from the sprinkler irrigation. And these fruiting bodies you can also observe on the stolons, which are indicated with black arrows, and on the fruits at the bottom right corner. I have included a case study on Phytophthora capsicii. This causes this pathogen. It causes rotting of fruit in many solanaceous and cucurbitaceous hosts, such as cucumber, eggplant, tomato, pepper, pumpkin, squash, melons, and zucchini. This study was done in Michigan for 3 years. And they noticed that the spores of the fungi were detected in the river, creek, and naturally fed pond. This present study focused on the detection of this pathogen in Michigan surface irrigation water. This selected area had 40 years history of cucumber production. The pathogen was detected in multiple years for 4 years. On the left side, these are the sites from where the water was, where the sampling was done. So you can see it's a long, on the scale value, this is 1 mile, but you can see that it is several miles, so that they monitored the water sources. What they did was that they put baits. In this case, they put 2 pears and 1 cucumber, and they incubated in open water sources for 3 to 7 days. And then when they brought it into the lab in C and D pictures, you can see the white sporulation on the cucumber, and then symptoms also on the pears. This table, it is just please focus on the red rectangle, where I have shown that little or no disease was observed in well-fed ponds, but where the water source was from open source, from rivers and from other naturally fed ponds, there was a high disease incidence was observed. Main conclusions from their finding, their study, was that infested irrigation water has been a key means of dissemination of Phytophthora capsicei in major vegetable production regions in Michigan. Ponds fed by deep wells are a safer option for growers than using surface water for irrigation. 92% of the waiting period showed the presence of this pathogen when the water temperature was between 15 to 25 degrees. I just wanted to before I showed you the fungi which produces spores in gelatinous matrix, we are well aware of powdery mildew. So this fungi, it has an opposite mechanism of spore production. So it produces, the spores are more dry. It's like a dry powder observed on the plants. And the wind can easily blow these spores. Sprinkler irrigation has been shown to have detrimental effect on powdery mildew disease progress. The mechanical impact of water droplets and water film harms the fungal structures and thus hinders disease progress. This has been shown in sugar beet and pumpkin, a lower incidence of sprinkler irrigated fields than furrow irrigated ones. So sprinkler irrigation has some mechanical injury. It does some mechanical injury to the spores, and it really reduces the disease severity. Midday wetting of foliage on greenhouse crops can reduce powdery mildew significantly. Here are some pictures on the left side, two pictures. So this is the picture of these are the pictures of grapes powdery mildew on the leaf and on the fruit, on the berries. On the right side, so this is the zoom in picture. You can see the spores very easily. They are like chains and they are easily dislodged as a powder with wind. How we can minimize the disease by irrigation management? So we can sowing at distances and fertilizing at rates that will not result in excessive density of the foliage, because it will impact the microclimate close to the soil surface. The amount of disease development depends on the number and length of wetting period. So it is amount of water and frequency of irrigation. So judicious spacing of irrigations according to crop and soil conditions should be considered. Choosing the time of the day in which sprinkling is least likely to enable the pathogen to complete the infection process. I will highlight it in the next slides with when I will discuss about this dew. So dew formation, dew is water. Remember that dew is water too. Your watering schedule has to account for it. Do not extend the period of leaf wetness by watering as dew is beginning to dry in the morning or before it forms in the evening. Dew is usually present from about midnight to 8 a.m. in the morning. If watering in the late afternoon or evening, make sure you stop watering early enough that the water areas dry before dark. Reduce disease incidence, disease inside plant canopies by proper pruning and landscaping. So in this picture, you can see that the dew formation is from 8 p.m. till 8 a.m. So you should not water just before and after dew formation, because in this way you are lengthening the leaf wetness duration, which is required by many pathogens to infect the plants. And how much water to irrigate? So the upper soil layers are quite dry. The deeper layers are moist. So this is normally we notice in the field that the upper soil layers are dry, but inside when we just dig a little bit, then it's moist. So it encourages the roots to grow deeply. So light watering in case of, for example, when you use drip irrigation in this picture on the right side, if it will promote the only shallow root formation. So then in this way, because water is readily available to the roots, so then they will not grow into the deeper layers, and then under hot conditions the plants will desiccate. But when you will irrigate deeply, on the left side you can see the plant, they have deeper roots, and they will exploit the deeper soil layers. So then they will have more nutrients, also access to the moisture, and they can withstand harsh weather conditions easily. You can easily check the soil moisture level in your soil if you have, like you test if a cake has been baked or not with a toothpick. You can use a wooden rod and you just uh, dig into the soil, and when you take it out, if you will see soil crumbs clinging or attaching to it, that it means it has enough moisture. By understanding the association between free moisture to disease development, irrigation can be modulated or managed to cut the duration of leaf wetness. Management of plant pathogens. In this few slides, I will try to discuss the how we can manage plant pathogens in irrigation water. One of the option is avoidance. So prevent the introduction of plant pathogens from known possible sources into water. Transplant only healthy plants in an irrigated area. Great care should be taken to prevent contaminated soil or crop debris from being carried into the water. Planting susceptible species close to or in water supplies or drainage ditches may significantly contribute to the amount of inoculum in the system. Drip irrigation systems could minimize the washing of spores from the crop to holding ponds, and minimize erosions of contaminated soil into drainage ditches and ponds. So drip irrigation really helps because it does not allow this. It does not have a splashing effect as it has sprinkler irrigation, and with furrow irrigation, the inoculum can be spread readily from point of infection to distant parts of the field. Another management option is physical use of physical barrier. In the right picture, you can see that if you use a fiber mat, so the water is just this mat is getting the water just by capillary action. Once it is saturated, then the pots will the soils in the pot, they will get the water with capillary action. So with this, it will provide a filter, and spores, for example, zoospores of Phytophthora or other fungal species, they will not be able to come into close contact with the roots. So two other options: use of surfactants. It's just an under experimental is at experimental phase. So it has been shown that surfactants, they lyse the spores of zoospores of Alpidium and Phytophthora species, but it will not have effect on those zoospores which have been encysted. So where they form a thick wall around them, there the surfactants will not have any lysing effect. Ozonation, it's in greenhouse settings. So ozone, it oxidizes substances when it is ozone is quickly oxidized when it is bubbled through water, and the ozone is reduced to oxygen, and so because it is reduced to oxygen, it has no detrimental effect on any organism or the plant. So it has no phytotoxicity. Major disadvantages of ozone treatment is that when it oxidizes, it also oxidizes fertilizers. So you have to put and then so the water, so it should be, when it is recycled, so it will be oxidized, and so you need a holding tank for it. Ultraviolet light water sterilizers are used only in greenhouse settings. So the conclusions from this talk is that clean water source for irrigation is important because it is a basis of it will ensure the successful and sustainable crop production. Water molds, for example, Phytophthora and Pythium species are found in open sources of water. Improper irrigation in the greenhouse may lead to disease establishment. If you will apply too much water, then it will result in Pythium damping of disease. And if you will do underwatering, that it will favor Fusarium and Rhizoctonia damping off. disease identification is very important to manage it. And that's why we have the plant health lab at Perennia. If you will go to our website, so with the in this yellow arrow, I have indicated the labs. Under lab services, you will find the plant health lab. In plant health lab, my colleague and me, we provide services to the growers. Kendra McClure, she provides the molecular diagnostics of viruses. And I am providing diagnostic services for the other crops. These are the resources which were used in this presentation. You can, if you want to know more detailed information, you can always click on any of the resource and find the information. And if you have any questions and comments, please email me, or you can ask me now, or you can call me. And thank you for your attention. And this is the code for securing your credits. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Sji. So anybody online, if you, Sji, can you show that barcode again for somebody who needs to scan the barcode?
Yes.
Yeah. So anybody who needs the point, you can just scan this barcode with your phone, and you will be able to get the points immediately. But if you have trouble of getting the points, you can send email to Sji to get that information. Okay, so I'm just gonna see. I don't see any questions or chat in the button. So I'm wondering if anybody has questions about Sji's presentation, or if you have any questions about this topic, you can just ask right now, and I can address the question to Sji and Dr. Hildebrand. It's very quiet. Yes, as Sji said, we have plant disease identification service in Perennia, so you can contact Sji or Kendra for more information, or if you need a service to manage the disease in your crops. All right. I don't see anybody is interact in the chat or Q&A. So we will stay online maybe another 2 minutes until 45. And then if nobody has questions, we will call the end of today's section. Our next and the last Getting into Weeds for this year is going to be on April 27, next Tuesday. So you can check out the information on Perennia's website and register for the section. It's going to be our last one for a year. And we also have a survey we will send out after today's section. Please fill out the survey if you like, and we will get some feedback from you guys and hear what you have to say about our section for this year. We can try to improve or add something into next this November section for the next round of Getting into Weeds. Okay, well, it's 45 and I still don't see any chat or Q&A in the section. I'm just going to call the end of today's section. Thank you so much, Sji, and thank you so much, Dr. Hildebrand, for joining us today. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Hugh and Paul. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.